The storm wasn't supposed to hit until midnight. By 4 p.m., Ryan Hayes was already watching his daughter's future disappear into a wall of white. Victoria Hale, billion-dollar CEO, ice queen of corporate America, sat in his back seat scrolling through emails like the weather was someone else's problem. She didn't know Ryan's father had died investigating her family. She didn't know the file folder hidden under his driver's seat. And she definitely didn't know that in 3 hours, when her private helicopter couldn't reach them, and the only shelter for 50 miles turned out to have just one bed, everything she'd built on lies was about to come crashing down. If you want to see how far a secret can travel before it destroys everything, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. This story's about to go places neither of them saw coming. Ryan Hayes had exactly $47 in his checking account when the temp agency called about the driving job. "Private client," the woman on the phone said, her voice clipped and efficient. "Executive transport. 6 hours, maybe 8 if traffic's bad. Pays $800 for the day." Ryan pressed the phone against his shoulder while he stirred mac and cheese on the stove. His daughter Emma sat at their kitchen table, coloring a picture of what she insisted was a dragon, but looked more like a purple blob with teeth. "What kind of executive, he asked. "The kind who doesn't like questions." A pause. "You interested or not?" $800. That was 2 months of Emma's gymnastics classes. New winter boots that actually fit. Maybe enough left over to stop getting notices from the electric company. "I'm interested." "Good. Client pickup is 7 a.m. tomorrow. Address is 1247 Riverside Drive, penthouse level. Dress code is business. Dark suit, white shirt, no cologne. And Hayes? Yeah? Don't be late." The line went dead. Emma looked up from her drawing. She was 6 years old with her mother's blonde hair and Ryan's gray eyes, the kind of gray that looked almost silver in certain light. "Was that about a job, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. Just a driving job." "Like pizza delivery?" "No, sweetheart. I'll be driving a person." "Is it a nice person?" Ryan thought about the woman's tone on the phone, the address in the part of town where doormen wore white gloves and apartments cost more than most people made in a lifetime. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but we need the money, so I'm going to find out." That night, after Emma fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with the folder he'd hidden in the back of his closet for the past 2 years. He shouldn't look at it again. He knew that. Every time he opened it, the anger came back fresh and sharp, like pressing on a bruise that never quite healed. But his hands moved anyway. Inside were photocopies of documents his father had left him, financial records, investment reports, names and numbers that meant nothing to most people but had meant everything to James Hayes, investigative journalist, before he'd wrapped his car around a tree on a clear summer night with no witnesses and a blood alcohol level that didn't make sense for a man who'd been sober for 15 years. "Accident," the police report said. Ryan had never believed it. And there, on the 3rd page, circled in his father's handwriting, "Hale Industries, offshore accounts, Q3 discrepancies, Victoria Hale." Ryan closed the folder and pressed his palms against his eyes. Tomorrow was just a driving job. $800. Nothing more. He repeated it to himself until he almost believed it. The next morning, Ryan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting a tie he'd borrowed from his neighbor. The suit was his own, the same one he'd worn to his father's funeral, and then to a string of job interviews that went nowhere after his position at the manufacturing plant got eliminated. It still fit, barely, though the shoulders were a little tight now from the construction work he'd been picking up when he could get it. Emma watched from the doorway, already dressed for school in leggings with a hole in one knee and a sweater that was starting to get too small. "You look fancy," she said. "Thanks, Em. Are you nervous?" "A little. Mom used to say you should pretend everyone's naked when you're nervous." Ryan couldn't help but smile. "Your mom said that about public speaking, not driving rich people around. Still might work." "I'll keep it in mind." He dropped Emma at before school care, kissed the top of her head, and promised he'd pick her up by 6. Then he drove his 15-year-old Honda across town to an address that made his GPS recalculate twice, like it couldn't believe he actually meant to go there. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of modern architecture that looked like it was designed to intimidate. A doorman stepped forward before Ryan even got out of the car. Service entrance is around back, the man said. I'm here for a pickup, penthouse level. The doorman's expression shifted slightly, not quite respect, but at least acknowledgement that Ryan wasn't completely out of place. Name? Hayes. Ryan Hayes. A glance at a tablet, a nod. Pull around to the garage entrance. Someone will direct you. The garage was underground, all concrete and fluorescent lights. A woman in a sharp black suit met him at the elevator. You're the driver? Yes, ma'am. She looked him over like she was inspecting produce. Ms. Hale expects punctuality and discretion. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't ask personal questions. You keep your eyes on the road and your opinions to yourself. Understood? Understood. The vehicle is a Mercedes S-Class, black, already detailed and fueled. You'll find it in spot P1. Miss Hale will be down in 10 minutes. Do not keep her waiting. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the elevator before Ryan could respond. The Mercedes was exactly where she said it would be, gleaming under the garage lights like it had been carved from a single piece of obsidian. Ryan slid into the driver's seat and immediately felt out of place. The interior smelled like leather and money. The dashboard had more controls than his entire apartment. He adjusted the mirrors, tested the turn signals, and waited. 9 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Victoria Hale didn't walk. She moved with the kind of purpose that made everyone else seem like they were standing still. She was maybe 35, tall and slim in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ryan made in 3 months. Her dark hair was pulled back severely from a face that was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, perfect, and completely untouchable. Ryan got out and opened the back door. She slid in without looking at him. Mountain Ridge Resort, she said. I assume you know where that is? Yes, ma'am. Good. And I prefer silence while I work, so unless the car is on fire, I don't need updates. Understood. Ryan closed the door, got back behind the wheel, and pulled out of the garage. For the first hour, Victoria Hale might as well have been a piece of furniture. She sat in the back seat with her laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. Occasionally her phone would ring. She answered every call with the same greeting, Hale. The conversations that followed were brief and devoid of anything resembling warmth. Push the Henderson meeting to Thursday. Tell them our offer is final. I don't care about his personal circumstances. I care about results. Ryan kept his eyes on the road and his mouth shut. They were 2 hours into the drive when the sky started to change. What had been a clear December morning turned gray, then darker gray, then the kind of black-green that meant serious weather was coming. Ryan glanced at the dashboard display. The temperature had dropped 8 degrees in the last 30 minutes. Ms. Hale? He said quietly. I said silence unless there's a storm moving in, faster than the forecast predicted. We're about an hour from Mountain Ridge, but if this turns into a whiteout, we might want to consider stopping somewhere until it passes. No. Ma'am, with respect, mountain roads in a snowstorm. I have a meeting at 3 o'clock that represents a $40 million acquisition. We're not stopping. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. If the roads get bad, then drive carefully. Her tone made it clear the conversation was over. 20 minutes later, the first flakes started to fall. 10 minutes after that, Ryan could barely see the road. The snow came down in thick, heavy curtains that the wipers couldn't keep up with. The temperature plummeted. What had been clear pavement turned slick and treacherous. Ryan slowed to 40 miles an hour, then 30, then 25. You're going to make me late, Victoria said from the back seat. I'm going to keep us alive. I didn't hire you for commentary. You hired me to drive, and I'm telling you this is dangerous. I've driven in snow before. Not like this. Ryan's voice was tight. Not on mountain roads with a 1,000-foot drop on one side and no guardrails. As if to prove his point, the Mercedes hit a patch of ice and fishtailed slightly before Ryan corrected. Victoria's laptop slid across the seat. For the first time since they'd left the city, she looked up. Pull over, she said. There's nowhere to... I said pull over. Ryan found a wider spot on the shoulder and eased the car to a stop. Before he could say anything, Victoria was out of the back seat and climbing into the front passenger seat, her phone pressed to her ear. Cancel the 3 o'clock, she said to whoever answered. Reschedule for tomorrow, because I'm not going to make it. I don't care about their schedule. Fine, 4 o'clock tomorrow, final offer. She ended the call and looked at Ryan. How far to the nearest town? We passed through Ridgemont about 30 miles back. And ahead? Mountain Ridge is still 40 miles, but there's a ranger station about 15 miles up. They might have information about road conditions, maybe shelter if we need it. Victoria stared out at the wall of white beyond the windshield. For a moment, something flickered across her face that might have been uncertainty. Then it was gone, replaced by the same cold calculation she'd worn all morning. Fine, the ranger station. But this doesn't become a habit. I don't tolerate incompetence. This isn't incompetence, Ryan said quietly. This is weather. Same result. They drove in tense silence, the storm building around them with every mile. The wind picked up, rocking the heavy Mercedes. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Ryan's shoulders ached from gripping the wheel. The ranger station, when they finally found it, looked abandoned. The small log building sat dark against the snow. No smoke from the chimney, no lights in the windows. Ryan pulled up as close as he could and killed the engine. Wait here, he said. I'm not a child. I didn't say you were. I said wait here while I check if anyone's inside. He didn't wait for her response. The cold hit him like a physical force when he opened the door. Wind and snow and air so frigid it burned his lungs. He made it to the ranger station door and pounded on it. Nothing. He tried the handle. Locked. There was a notice board next to the door, protected by plexiglass. Ryan brushed snow off it and read, Station closed for season. Emergency shelter available 5 miles north. Follow red markers. He ran back to the car, his face already numb. Station's closed, he said, breathing hard, but there's emergency shelter 5 miles north. Victoria looked at him, then at the storm. Can we make it? I don't know. But we can't stay here. The 5 miles took 40 minutes of white-knuckle driving through conditions that would have had any sane person pulled over and praying. Ryan followed red markers that appeared and disappeared in the snow like ghosts. Twice the car slid sideways. Once they scraped something, a rock or a fallen branch, that left a screaming sound against the passenger side. Victoria didn't speak. She just sat rigid in the passenger seat, one hand braced against the dashboard. The shelter, when they reached it, was barely visible through the storm. A single-story cabin built from dark wood and stone, set back in a clearing surrounded by pine trees bent nearly horizontal by the wind. Ryan parked as close as he could. Stay here while I check it out. This time Victoria didn't argue. The cabin door was unlocked. Inside was cold but dry. One large room with a stone fireplace, a kitchenette, a bathroom, and against the far wall, one bed. Ryan stood in the doorway and felt the universe laughing at him. Well? Victoria appeared beside him, snow covering her dark hair, her expensive suit. She looked around the cabin, and he watched her expression shift as she registered what he'd already seen. You've got to be kidding me, she said. There might be blankets, Ryan offered. I can sleep on the floor. This is unacceptable. Yeah, well, take it up with the weather. Victoria turned to look at him, really look at him, for maybe the first time all day. Do you have any idea who I am? Yeah. You're the woman who's stuck in a cabin with me, whether you like it or not. Something flashed in her eyes. Anger or surprise, he couldn't tell which. Before she could respond, a gust of wind hit the cabin so hard the windows rattled. We should get the car unpacked before the storm gets worse, Ryan said. Whatever supplies they have in here, I want to know what we're working with. For a long moment, Victoria just stared at him. Then, to his surprise, she nodded. They made 3 trips between the car and the cabin, bringing in everything that might be useful. Victoria's laptop bag and briefcase, Ryan's emergency kit from the trunk, jumper cables, a flashlight, a first aid box, bottled water. In the cabin's storage closet, they found firewood, matches, canned food, and 2 wool blankets that smelled like mothballs. Ryan got a fire going while Victoria examined the canned goods with obvious distaste. Beans, she said. Soup. More beans. Better than nothing. Is it? Ryan sat back on his heels and looked at her. She stood in the middle of the cabin, still wearing her coat, her arms wrapped around herself, looking completely and utterly out of place. For the first time, he felt something other than resentment toward her. Pity, maybe, or just the recognition that money and power didn't mean much when you were trapped in a cabin in a snowstorm. Look, he said, I know this isn't what you signed up for. It's not what I signed up for either, but we're here and we're stuck until the storm passes. So we can spend that time making each other miserable, or we can try to make the best of it. Victoria studied him. You don't talk like a driver. I don't just drive for a living. What else do you do? Whatever pays. He turned back to the fire, feeding it another log. Construction, moving jobs, temp work. Today I'm a driver. Tomorrow, who knows? That's not a career, that's chaos. That's survival. He heard her move, the soft sound of expensive shoes on the wood floor. When he glanced over his shoulder, she'd taken off her coat and draped it over a chair. Underneath, her suit was rumpled, a small tear in the sleeve from the wind. I'm going to see if there's cell service, she said. There wasn't. Ryan could have told her that, but he let her figure it out herself. She stood by the window, her phone held up like an offering, moving it in small circles while the no service message stayed stubbornly unchanged. Landline? She asked. Checked. Dead. Or radio? If there is one, I haven't found it. Victoria set her phone down with more force than necessary. This is insane. People know where I am. They'll send someone. Not in this storm, they won't. Ryan stood up, brushing off his hands. No helicopters flying in this. No cars making it up that road. We're on our own until it clears. When will that be? I don't know. Could be hours. Could be tomorrow. Tomorrow? Victoria said the word like it was obscene. I have 17 meetings tomorrow. A conference call with Singapore. A presentation to the board. Yeah, well, the storm doesn't care. She turned on him. Do you think this is funny? No, I think it's reality. My reality is worth millions of dollars. What's yours worth? Ryan felt the anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. My reality is a 6-year-old daughter who's going to wonder where her dad is when I don't pick her up from school. My reality is $47 in the bank and a car that might not start next time I turn the key. So no, Ms. Hale, I don't think this is funny, but I also don't think your meetings make you special. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Victoria looked at him like he'd slapped her. Then, slowly her expression shifted. The anger drained away, replaced by something he couldn't quite read. You have a daughter, she said. Yeah. How old? 6. Is someone taking care of her? The after-school program. They'll call my neighbor if I'm not there by 6. She'll be fine. He hoped that was true. Your people know where you are? My assistant knows the route. When I don't check in, she'll start making calls. Then I guess we both have people worrying about us. Victoria moved to the small couch near the fireplace and sat down, her posture perfect even in disaster. I don't usually worry people. I usually am the worry. Ryan almost smiled. Yeah, I got that impression. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. Ryan found a dented pot in the kitchenette and started opening cans of soup. What are you doing? Victoria asked. Making dinner. You eat, right? Of course I eat. Could have fooled me. He heated the soup over the fire, chicken noodle from a can that was probably older than his daughter. It smelled like salt and preservatives and absolutely nothing like real food. He poured it into 2 mugs he'd found in the cabinet and handed one to Victoria. She took it like he was handing her poison. It's soup, Ryan said, not a grenade. It's been a long time since I ate anything from a can. Yeah, well, welcome to how the other half lives. She took a careful sip and made a face. This is terrible. Yep. Why are you smiling? Because at least we agree on something. They ate in silence. Ryan stood by the fire, warming his hands. Victoria stayed on the couch, her soup cooling in her lap. Through the window, the storm showed no signs of stopping. If anything, it was getting worse. We should talk about sleeping arrangements, Ryan said finally. I already told you. I'm not sharing that bed. Okay, so you take the bed? I'll take the couch. That's not fair. You're taller. I've slept in worse places. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Victoria set her mug down. The point is this whole situation is absurd. We're 2 complete strangers trapped in a cabin with one bed like some ridiculous romance novel. Trust me, Ryan said. There's nothing romantic about this. I didn't mean... She stopped, took a breath. I'm not good at this. At what? Being out of control. Ryan looked at her sitting there in her expensive suit, her perfect posture, her carefully blank expression, and he saw something he hadn't expected. Fear. Not of him. Not even of the storm, really. but of being vulnerable, of being in a situation where money and power and position didn't mean anything. Nobody's good at it, he said quietly. That's why it's called being out of control. For a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them, understanding, maybe, or just the recognition that they were both human underneath all the roles they played. Then Victoria looked away. I should try to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Yeah. She stood, picked up one of the wool blankets, and walked toward the bed. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back. Hayes? Yeah? Thank you for getting us here safely. You're welcome. She nodded and disappeared behind the privacy of the bathroom door. Ryan added another log to the fire and settled onto the couch with the second blanket. It was too short and smelled like an attic, but he'd meant what he said. He'd slept in worse places. Through the thin walls, he could hear water running, the sound of Victoria moving around. Then quiet. He closed his eyes and thought about Emma. By now, his neighbor would have picked her up. She'd be eating dinner, probably chicken nuggets and frozen peas. She'd ask where Daddy was. His neighbor would tell her he got stuck in the storm, but he was safe. He hoped that was true. The fire crackled, the storm raged, and somewhere in the darkness, Ryan heard Victoria's phone buzz with a notification that couldn't reach her, trying desperately to connect to a world that felt very far away. He pulled the blanket tighter and waited for morning. An hour later, Ryan was still awake. The couch was worse than he'd thought, lumpy and too narrow, with a spring that dug into his lower back no matter how he positioned himself. The fire had died down to embers. The temperature in the cabin was dropping. He heard movement from the bedroom area. Footsteps. Then Victoria's voice, quiet in the darkness. Hayes? Yeah? I can't sleep. Me neither. A pause. The bed is big enough for 2 adults if we stay on opposite sides. Ryan sat up. He could barely see her silhouette in the dim light from the dying fire. You sure? He asked. No, but I'm cold and you're clearly uncomfortable and this is practical. Nothing more. Practical, right. He stood up, grabbed at his blanket, and moved toward the bed. Victoria was already on the far side, lying rigid as a board on top of the covers, still fully dressed. Ryan took the near side, keeping as much distance as possible. For a long moment, neither of them moved. This is weird, Victoria said. Yep. If you tell anyone about this, who would I tell? I don't even know anyone who knows you. Another pause. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It was quiet and brief, but it was real. Fair point, she said. They lay there in the darkness, the storm outside, 2 strangers separated by 18 inches and a lifetime of different choices. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Why driving? If you do construction and temp work, why take a driving job? Money. Your company pays better than most. You knew it was my company? Ryan hesitated. This was the moment. He could tell her the truth, that he'd known exactly who she was, that her name had been circled in his father's handwriting, that he'd taken this job because he wanted to see her face, to understand what kind of person built an empire on secrets. But looking at her now, just another human being trying to get through a difficult night, he found he couldn't do it. The agency mentioned it, he said instead. Hale Industries. Hard to miss. And you didn't care? Should I have? Most people have opinions about me, about my company. I've got enough problems without having opinions about people I don't know. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Your daughter, she said. What's her name? Emma. That's pretty. She's pretty amazing. Is her mother dead? Cancer, 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Ryan could feel Victoria looking at him in the darkness. That must be hard, she said, raising a child alone. Some days are harder than others. Do you have help? Family? My father died 2 years ago. Car accident. My mom passed when I was young. It's just me and Em now. That's a lot of loss. Yeah, well, life doesn't ask permission. Another stretch of silence. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a tree branch cracked under the weight of snow. I don't know anything about children, Victoria said quietly. I never wanted them, never had time for them. My father used to say family was a weakness in business. Sounds like a real warm guy. He was effective. Effective isn't the same as good. No, Victoria agreed. It's not. Ryan turned onto his side, facing away from her. You should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Hayes? Yeah? Why did you really take this job? The question hung in the air between them. Ryan's heart kicked up a notch. She was smarter than he'd given her credit for. I told you, he said. Money. There are other driving jobs. Easier ones, closer to home. Maybe I like a challenge. Or maybe you're not telling me something. Ryan closed his eyes. Go to sleep, Ms. Hale. He heard her shift, settling back into her side of the bed. Victoria, she said. What? If we're sharing a bed, you can call me Victoria. Ryan didn't answer. He just lay there in the darkness, listening to her breathe, and thought about his father's folder hidden under the driver's seat of the Mercedes, buried in snow outside. Tomorrow, he'd figure out what to do with the truth. Tonight, he just needed to survive the storm. Ryan woke to pale gray light filtering through ice-crusted windows and the smell of old coffee. For a disoriented moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then he felt the mattress beneath him, heard the wind still battering the cabin walls, and turned his head to find Victoria's side of the bed empty. She stood at the kitchenette counter, still in yesterday's suit, pouring hot water from a dented kettle into 2 mugs. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. And without the severe styling, she looked younger, almost vulnerable. You're awake, she said without turning around. Yeah. Ryan sat up, his back protesting. Even the bed hadn't been comfortable. How long have you been up? An hour? Maybe more? I found instant coffee in the cabinet. It's terrible, but it's caffeinated. She brought him a mug. He took it, their fingers brushing for a second. The coffee was terrible, burnt and bitter, but it was warm. Storm's still going, he said, looking at the window. I noticed. Your people will be looking for you by now. Yes. Victoria moved to the window, cradling her mug in both hands. My assistant will have called the police, probably the state patrol. My father will have called everyone else. Your father? He's on the board. Semi-retired technically, but he still acts like he runs everything. Her voice carried an edge Ryan hadn't heard before. He'll be furious I missed yesterday's meeting. Even though you're stuck in a storm? He doesn't believe in circumstances beyond your control. He thinks control is just a matter of will. Ryan took another sip of the awful coffee. Sounds like a real warm guy. Victoria almost smiled. You said that last night. Still true this morning. She turned to face him. In the gray stormlight, her eyes were darker than he'd thought. Not quite black, but close. Do you always say exactly what you think? Not always. But I figure if we're stuck here, we might as well be honest. Honesty is overrated, says the woman who built a billion-dollar company. Especially says that woman. Victoria set her mug down on the windowsill. You want to know the truth about success, Hayes? It's not about being honest. It's about being strategic. Knowing what to say, when to say it, and to whom. Honesty is just another tool. That's pretty cynical. That's reality. Ryan stood up, stretching the kinks out of his spine. My father used to say the truth was the only thing you owned that nobody could take from you. What did your father do? He was a journalist. Investigative reporting, mostly. Corporate stuff, government contracts, financial crimes. Ryan moved to the fire, feeding it logs from the dwindling pile. He believed in accountability. Thought if people knew the truth, they'd make better choices. Did they? Sometimes. Other times, they just got mad at him for telling them. Victoria studied him. You said he died in a car accident. That's what the police report said. But you don't believe it. Ryan turned to look at her. This was dangerous territory. He could feel himself moving toward the edge of something he couldn't take back. He'd been working on a story, Ryan said carefully. Something big. He wouldn't tell me what, but I could see it eating at him. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just research and phone calls and late nights at his desk. And then one night he wrapped his car around a tree on a straight stretch of road. Blood alcohol levels said he was drunk, but my father had been sober for 15 years. He wouldn't even take cough medicine with alcohol in it. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. What did the police say? That sometimes people fall off the wagon, that stress can do that I should accept it and move on. But you didn't. No. Why not? Ryan set down his coffee mug. Because he left me a folder. Not officially, no note, no instructions. Just a folder hidden in his desk that I found after the funeral. Full of documents, financial records, notes in his handwriting. About what? This was it. The moment where he either committed to the lie or told her the truth. Ryan looked at Victoria standing there in her wrinkled suit, her perfect composure starting to crack, and made his choice. I don't know, he lied. The documents didn't make sense to me, just numbers and company names, but they meant something to him. Enough that maybe someone didn't want him finding out what. Victoria was very still. You think someone killed him? I think it's possible. Have you gone to the police? With what? A folder of papers I don't understand and a feeling? They already closed the case. What about other journalists? Someone who could help you make sense of it? Ryan shook his head. My father didn't trust easily. If he was working alone, there was a reason. They stood in silence. Outside, the storm seemed to have settled into a steady, relentless assault. Snow piled against the windows. Wind screamed through the pine trees. I'm sorry, Victoria said finally. About your father. Yeah, me too. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you telling me this? We barely know each other. Ryan met her eyes. Maybe that's why. Sometimes it's easier to tell the truth to strangers. Victoria looked like she wanted to say something else, but then her stomach growled loudly enough that they both heard it. Despite everything, Ryan almost laughed. When's the last time you ate? He asked. Yesterday, the soup. That's it? I don't usually eat much. Busy schedule. You mean you don't make time to eat? Same thing. Ryan moved back to the kitchenette and started opening cabinets. Let's see what we've got for breakfast. More canned soup, canned vegetables, some kind of mystery meat in a tin. He held up a can. And what appears to be peaches from 1987. That can't be safe. Probably not. But we're also not going to starve. He found a can opener and went to work on a tin of beans. How do you feel about beans for breakfast? I feel like this is the worst morning of my life. Could be worse, could be the mystery meat. This time she did smile, just a little. You're very calm about all this. What else am I going to be? Panicking won't change the weather. Most people panic anyway. Most people haven't raised a 6-year-old alone for 3 years. Once you've dealt with a kid having a meltdown in the grocery store because you bought the wrong-shaped pasta, a snowstorm is just weather. Victoria moved to the small table and sat down. What's the wrong-shaped pasta? Rigatoni instead of penne. Apparently they're very different. Are they? According to Emma, it's the difference between eating and starving. She sounds dramatic. She's 6. Everything is dramatic. Ryan dumped the beans into the pot to heat them. Last week she cried for 20 minutes because her stuffed rabbit's ear was bent wrong. Could you fix it? Eventually. After I tried 3 different ways and she explained very patiently that I was doing it wrong each time. Victoria laughed. It was a real laugh this time, not the polite sound from last night. She sounds exhausting. She is. She's also the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. Ryan stirred the beans. Before Emma, I was just going through motions. Work, sleep, repeat. After her mom died, I had to figure out what actually mattered. Turns out it's pretty simple, making sure your kid knows they're loved and keeping them fed and safe. Everything else is just noise. That's a very reductive view of life. Maybe, but it works. They ate breakfast in relative silence, beans and stale crackers that Victoria picked at like they might poison her. Ryan finished his portion and started on hers when she pushed the plate away. You need to eat more than that, he said. I'm not hungry. You're never hungry, or you've trained yourself not to be. Victoria looked at him sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've noticed you don't eat. You don't relax. You don't stop working even when there's nothing to work on. When's the last time you just sat and did nothing? I don't do nothing. I can tell. Is this the part where you tell me I work too hard? No. This is the part where I wonder what you're running from. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria's expression went cold. You don't know anything about me, she said. I know you're sitting in a cabin in a snowstorm and you still can't stop checking your phone every 5 minutes even though there's no service. I know you haven't relaxed once since I met you. And I know that whatever you've built, it doesn't leave room for anything else. My company is worth, I don't care what it's worth. Ryan leaned forward. I'm asking what it costs. Victoria stood up abruptly. I don't have to justify my life to you. No, you don't. But you might want to justify it to yourself. She stared at him, her face flushed with anger or something else he couldn't name. Then she turned and walked to the far side of the cabin, putting as much distance between them as the small space allowed. Ryan immediately felt like garbage. He'd pushed too hard, too fast. Whatever authority he thought he had in this situation was imaginary. She was still his boss, technically, and he was still just the driver. I'm sorry, he said. That was out of line. Victoria didn't turn around. My father had a heart attack when I was 12. Ryan went still. He survived, she continued, her voice flat. But after that, everything changed. My mother couldn't handle the stress. She left 6 months later. My father threw himself into work like it could save him from dying. And I learned that the only thing you could count on was yourself. Victoria, he taught me everything. How to read a balance sheet, how to negotiate, how to never show weakness. By the time I was 16, I was sitting in on board meetings. By 21, I was running divisions. By 28, I was CEO. She finally turned to face him. So yes, I work hard. Yes, I don't eat or relax or do nothing. Because the moment I stop, someone else takes what I've built. That's how the world works. That's how your father taught you the world works. Same thing. No, it's not. Victoria crossed her arms. You think you understand me because we've been stuck together for one night? I think I understand what it's like to be scared. I'm not scared. Everyone's scared of something. You're just better at hiding it. They stood across the cabin from each other, the fire crackling between them, both of them bruised in different ways by different losses. What are you scared of? Victoria asked quietly. Ryan considered lying, then decided he'd already gone this far. I'm scared I'm failing Emma, that I'm not enough, that one day she'll grow up and realize her dad was just barely keeping his head above water the whole time. And does she know that? That you feel that way? No. Then maybe you're better at hiding it than you think. They looked at each other across the small room, and something shifted. Some wall came down, or some door opened. Ryan couldn't say which, but the air felt different. Truce, he offered. Truce, Victoria agreed. The rest of the morning passed in careful peace. They took turns reading old magazines they found in a cabinet, outdated issues of hunting journals and tourism guides. Victoria attempted to do yoga in the small space near the fire and gave up after 10 minutes. Ryan checked the storm and reported no change. They rationed the firewood because neither of them knew how long they'd be there. Around noon, Victoria's phone buzzed. They both jumped. She grabbed it, staring at the screen. I have signal. 1 bar. Try calling your assistant. Victoria dialed, pressed the phone to her ear. Come on, come on. Her face fell. Voicemail. Try again. She did. Same result. On the third try, the call connected for exactly 4 seconds before dropping. Damn it! Victoria tried text messages instead, thumbs flying across the screen. I don't know if these are sending. Keep trying. Maybe one will get through. She sent 6 messages in a row, then set the phone on the windowsill. If anyone responds, at least I'll see it. What did you tell them? That we're safe, that we're at the emergency shelter, that we need extraction as soon as the weather clears. She paused. And that I'm sorry for missing yesterday. You apologized. I'm difficult, Hayes. Not a monster. Could have fooled me yesterday. Yesterday I was working. Today I'm surviving. Different skill sets. Ryan smiled despite himself. Fair enough. They made lunch out of canned soup and crackers. Victoria actually finished hers this time. Afterward, she did something that surprised him. She asked about Emma. What's she like? Victoria said. Besides dramatic. Smart. Funny. She asks about 1,000,000 questions a day. Last week she wanted to know why the sky was blue, how birds knew where to fly, and if dinosaurs had belly buttons. Do they? I have no idea. I told her we'd look it up. And did you? We got distracted by a YouTube video about volcanoes. Then she wanted to build one in the kitchen. Did you let her? It's sitting on the counter right now, made out of paper mache and food coloring. It's a mess, but she's proud of it. Victoria smiled. You're a good father. I try. That's more than some people do. There was something in her voice that made Ryan look at her more carefully. Your father? He tried, in his way. But his way was mostly about making sure I could survive without him, not about making sure I wanted to. That's not the same thing as love. No, it's not. They fell silent. Outside, the storm seemed to be weakening. The wind wasn't quite as violent. The snow fell in smaller flurries instead of blinding sheets. Hayes, Victoria said. Yeah? That folder your father left you, the documents, do you still have them? Ryan's pulse kicked up. Yeah. Would you ever want someone to help you understand them? Someone who knows how to read financial records? Why? Because if your father died for something, you deserve to know what it was. Ryan studied her face, trying to read what was behind the offer. Genuine concern? Curiosity? Something else? That's a generous offer, he said carefully. It's practical. I have resources. Expertise. If there's something worth finding, I can help you find it. And if what I find implicates someone you know? Victoria didn't flinch. Then at least you'll know the truth. It was the right answer. Too right, maybe. Ryan felt suspicion coil in his gut even as he wanted to believe her. I'll think about it, he said. They didn't talk about it again. Instead, they spent the afternoon in a kind of quiet domesticity that felt surreal given who they were and how they'd ended up here. Victoria attempted to organize the cabin's supplies while Ryan reinforced the fire. They played cards using a deck they found in a drawer, Victoria winning 3 games in a row before Ryan figured out she was counting cards. You're cheating, he said. I'm using available information. That's literally the definition of cheating. No, cheating would be hiding cards. I'm just paying attention. To every card that's been played? Yes. Ryan threw down his hand. You're impossible. I'm good at games. There's a difference. What if I don't want to play games? Then you'll lose. They stared at each other across the small table. Then both of them started laughing at the same time. The kind of laughter that comes from exhaustion and absurdity and being stuck somewhere you never planned to be. When the laughter faded, Victoria's expression turned serious. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. When you took this job, driving for me, did you know who I was? Ryan felt ice in his veins. The agency told me. That's not what I asked. What are you asking? I'm asking if you took this job because you wanted to drive me or because you wanted to meet me. The cabin felt suddenly smaller. Ryan could hear his own heartbeat. Why would I want to meet you? He said. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. You think I'm some kind of stalker? I think you're smarter than you pretend to be. I think you're carrying something heavy, and I think you looked at me differently when I mentioned my father. Ryan stood up. I looked at you the same way anyone looks at someone who just told them something personal. No, you looked at me like you already knew. Knew what? Victoria stood too, facing him across the table. That's what I'm trying to figure out. They were both tense now, the easy afternoon gone, replaced by something sharp and dangerous. You want the truth? Ryan said. Fine. Yeah, I knew who you were. Yeah, I took the job knowing it was you. But not because I'm obsessed with you or I wanted to stalk you or whatever else you're thinking. Then why? Because I'm broke and you pay well and I needed the money. That's it. That's the whole story. I don't believe you. That's your problem, not mine. Victoria's phone buzzed on the windowsill. They both turned to look at it. She grabbed it, read the screen. It's my assistant, she said. Helicopter will be here first thing tomorrow if the weather clears. She says the roads won't be passable for days, but air extraction is possible. Good. Then you can get back to your life and I can get back to mine. Fine. Fine. They stood there glaring at each other like children, and some part of Ryan recognized how ridiculous it was. But the larger part, the part that was scared she'd figured him out, that she'd put the pieces together about his father and her company, couldn't let it go. Victoria turned away first. I'm going to try to clean up. We'll need to be ready to leave tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. She disappeared into the bathroom. Ryan heard water running. He sat back down at the table and put his head in his hands. This was supposed to be simple. Drive her, see what kind of person she was, figure out if his father's death had anything to do with her family. Instead, He'd spent a night and a day getting to know her as a human being, and now everything was complicated. Because the truth was, he liked her. Under the Ice Queen exterior, under the corporate armor, Victoria was sharp and funny, and more vulnerable than she'd ever admit. She was lonely in a way he recognized, and part of him, the stupid, self-destructive part, wanted to help her. But how could he help her if her father was the reason his father was dead? The bathroom door opened. Victoria emerged looking slightly more put together, her hair smoothed back, her suit jacket straightened as much as possible. "I'm sorry," she said. Ryan looked up. "For what?" "For accusing you. It's not fair. We're both stressed and stuck here and—" She stopped. "I don't know why I said that." "Because you're smart and you sense something's off. Is something off?" This was the moment. Tell her the truth or keep lying. Ryan thought about his father, about Emma, about the folder hidden in the Mercedes, and what would happen if he actually showed it to Victoria. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Something's off." Victoria sat down across from him. "Tell me." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I can trust you." She flinched like he'd hit her. "That's fair." "Is it?" "You don't know me." "Not really. And what you do know, what I've shown you, isn't exactly inspiring trust." "You've been fine. Better than fine. You've been—" Ryan struggled for the word. "Real." "Real is overrated in my world. Maybe that's the problem with your world." They sat in silence. The fire burned low. Outside, the storm had definitely weakened. Through gaps in the clouds, Ryan could see patches of dark blue sky. "My father isn't a good man," Victoria said suddenly. Ryan went still. "He built Hale Industries through connections and leverage, and sometimes things that probably weren't legal. I know that. I've always known that." She looked at her hands. "When I took over as CEO, I told myself I'd be different, that I'd clean things up, run the company the right way. But then I got there and realized how deep it all went. How many people depended on things staying exactly the way they were." "So you kept it all going?" "I kept what I could justify and buried the rest. Or I tried to." She met his eyes. "If your father was investigating corporate corruption, and if he was looking at Hale Industries, he would have found things. Bad things. Things my father did that I've spent years trying to contain." Ryan's chest felt tight. "Are you telling me—" "I'm not telling you anything for certain. I'm saying it's possible. And if it is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry my father is who he is. I'm sorry I haven't had the courage to burn it all down and start over. And I'm sorry that if your father died because of something my family did, I've been complicit by staying silent." The weight of her words settled over them both. Ryan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to scream at her. Part of him wanted to show her the folder right now, demand she tell him everything. But another part, a bigger part, recognized that she'd just done something incredibly brave. She'd told him the truth when she could have kept lying. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because you asked earlier what it costs. My company, my success, all of it. This is what it costs, knowing you're part of something wrong and not being strong enough to stop it." She stood up. "Tomorrow we'll get rescued and go back to our separate lives. You'll forget about me and I'll forget about you. But tonight, for whatever it's worth, I wanted you to know that I see it. The cost. And I hate it." She walked to the window and stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, looking out at the storm. Ryan sat at the table and made a decision. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Victoria asked. "The car. There's something I need to show you." The cold hit Ryan like a fist the moment he stepped outside. Snow had drifted against the cabin door nearly 3 feet high, and he had to force his way through it. The wind had died down to almost nothing, but the temperature had dropped so far that each breath felt like inhaling knives. The Mercedes was buried. Only the roof and upper windows were visible under a smooth white mound that looked almost peaceful, like the car was sleeping under a heavy blanket. Ryan started digging with his bare hands, then gave up and went back inside for the small shovel they'd found in the storage closet. Victoria stood in the doorway watching. "What are you doing?" "Getting something. It can wait until tomorrow." "No, it can't." He dug in silence, his shoulders burning from the effort. Victoria disappeared back inside, then returned wearing his coat over her suit jacket. She picked up a broken piece of wood from the porch and started helping him clear snow. You don't have to, Ryan started. I know. They worked together without speaking, their breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. After 20 minutes, Ryan had cleared enough to open the driver's side door. He reached under the seat, felt the familiar shape of the folder, and pulled it out. The pages were cold but dry. He held them against his chest as they trudged back to the cabin. Inside, he shook the snow from his hair and laid the folder on the table. His hands were red and numb. Victoria set a mug of hot water in front of him without a word. "Thank you," he said. She sat down across from him, her eyes on the folder. "Is that it?" "Yeah." "Are you sure you want to show me?" Ryan thought about his father hunched over his desk at midnight, making notes in the margins of financial statements. Thought about the funeral where too few people came because James Hayes had spent his career making powerful people uncomfortable. Thought about Emma asking why Grandpa wasn't coming back, and Ryan having to explain death to a 3-year-old who thought everything could be fixed with enough Band-Aids. "No," he said, "but I'm going to anyway." He opened the folder and spread the contents across the table. Photocopied bank statements, wire transfer records, pages from annual reports with certain figures highlighted, handwritten notes connecting names and dates and dollar amounts. To anyone else, it would have looked like chaos. To his father, it had been a story. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes scanning the pages. Her expression didn't change, but Ryan saw her hands tighten on the edge of the table. "Where did he get these?" she asked quietly. "I don't know. Freedom of information requests, maybe. Anonymous sources. He never told me. These transfers..." She picked up one of the photocopied statements. "These are from Hale Industries to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." "Is that unusual?" "No, lots of companies use offshore accounts for legitimate tax purposes." She set down the first page and picked up another. "But these amounts, these dates, they don't match any legitimate business expenses I know about. What are they?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her finger tracing down a column of numbers. "I'd need to see the full records to be certain, but if I had to guess, someone was moving money out of the company, large amounts, systematically, over years. Embezzlement? Maybe. Or payments to someone. Bribes, hush money, kickbacks, could be anything." She looked up at him. "When did your father die?" 2 years ago, July." "And when did he start investigating this?" "I don't know exactly, but I found notes from at least 6 months before." Victoria picked up another page, then another, laying them out in a pattern only she could see. These dates cluster around specific events: board meetings, acquisitions, regulatory filings, someone who knew the company's internal calendar. "Your father?" "Possibly. Or someone working for him." She pulled out one page with several figures circled in red ink. "This transaction, $15 million, moved 3 days before a major EPA inspection at our chemical plant in Louisiana. The inspection found no violations." "You're saying someone was bribed?" "I'm saying it's suspicious." Victoria's voice was tight. "And there are a dozen more like it in here." Ryan watched her work through the documents with increasing speed, her corporate mask slipping to reveal something raw underneath. "Anger, maybe. Or fear. How much does this add up to?" he asked. She did the math in her head. Conservatively, $150 million over 8 years. Jesus. And that's just what your father found. There could be more. They sat in silence. The documents spread between them like evidence at a crime scene, which, Ryan supposed, was exactly what they were. "My father circled your name," Ryan said, "on one of the pages. I didn't show you that one yet." Victoria went very still. "Show me." He found the page, a list of board members and their compensation packages. Next to Victoria's name, his father had written a single question mark. "He wasn't sure about you," Ryan said. "Whether you knew, whether you were part of it." "And what do you think?" "Yesterday I would have said yes. Today..." He stopped. "I don't know." Victoria stared at her own name on the page, at the question mark that felt like an accusation. "I became CEO 3 years ago. Before that, I was head of operations. I had access to the books, the accounts, most of the company's financial records." She looked up at Ryan. "I should have seen this. If these transactions were happening, if money was being moved like this, I should have known." Should have or did. I saw irregularities, things that didn't add up. But every time I asked questions, my father had explanations. Consulting fees, offshore partnerships, restructuring costs. There was always a reason. Her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to believe him. That's not the same as knowing, isn't it? I'm the CEO. The company is my responsibility. If I didn't look hard enough because I was scared of what I'd find, that's the same as knowing. Ryan understood that logic. He'd used it on himself every time he looked at his father's folder, and then put it away again, telling himself he wasn't ready, that he needed more information, that maybe it was better not to know. What do we do now? He asked. Victoria gathered the papers back into a pile, her movements precise and controlled. That depends. On what? On what you want. Justice? Revenge? Closure? I want to know what happened to my father. These documents don't tell you that. They tell you there was financial fraud at my company, probably orchestrated by my father, but they don't prove he killed anyone. He didn't have to personally do it. He just had to make a phone call. Victoria looked at him. Is that what you believe? Ryan thought about the police report, the empty bottle of whiskey in the car that his father never would have bought. The timing, just weeks after those last frantic phone calls where James Hayes had told Ryan he was close to something big. Yeah, he said, that's what I believe. Then we need more than this. Victoria tapped the folder. This is evidence of financial crimes, maybe enough to start an investigation, but connecting it to your father's death? That's going to be almost impossible. So we do nothing? I didn't say that. Ryan leaned back in his chair. What are you saying? I'm saying if you want the truth, really want it, you need to be prepared for how ugly it's going to get. My father has lawyers, connections, people who owe him favors. He spent 40 years building walls around himself. Taking him down means going to war. And you're willing to do that? Against your own father? Victoria was quiet for a long time. Outside, the clouds had cleared enough that actual sunlight was breaking through, weak and pale, but real. It made the cabin's interior look shabby and small. When I was 16, she said finally, my father made me sit in on a negotiation. A factory we owned in Ohio had been cited for safety violations. A worker had been injured, lost 2 fingers in a machine that should have had a safety guard but didn't. The worker's lawyer wanted a settlement. My father offered him $20,000 and a confidentiality agreement. Did he take it? He took it. My father told me later that everyone has a price, that the trick is finding it before they realize they're selling themselves. She looked at Ryan. I've spent 20 years trying not to become that, trying to be better than him, but I still cash the checks. I still run the company he built. So maybe I'm exactly what he made me. Or maybe you're here right now, looking at evidence that could destroy everything you have, and you're not running. I'm trapped in a cabin. Where would I run? You know that's not what I mean. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're giving me too much credit. I haven't decided anything yet. Yes, you have. Or you wouldn't have helped me dig out that car. You wouldn't be sitting here reading these documents instead of throwing them in the fire. Maybe I'm just curious. No, you're angry. There's a difference. She didn't deny it. Instead, she stood up and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself in that defensive posture Ryan was starting to recognize. If we do this, she said, if we actually try to expose what my father did, you need to understand what you're signing up for. He won't go quietly. He'll attack your credibility, dig into your past, find every mistake you've ever made, and use it against you. He'll make your life hell. He already killed my father. How much worse can it get? He could go after Emma. The words hit Ryan like a physical blow. What? Not directly. He's not that stupid, but custody challenges, anonymous calls to child services, questions about whether a single father with an unstable income is fit to raise a child alone, that's all fair game. You're saying he'd use my daughter to shut me up. I'm saying he's done worse to protect himself. And if you think he wouldn't, you're not taking him seriously enough. Ryan's hands curled into fists. Then we make sure he can't. We move fast. Get this to people who can act on it before he knows what's coming. Who? The police dismissed your father's death as an accident. The SEC moves slowly, even with concrete evidence. Journalists. She stopped. Do you know any journalists who worked with your father, someone he trusted? He mostly worked alone, but he had an editor at the paper, a guy named Marcus Brennan. He's retired now, but my father mentioned him sometimes. Would he help? I don't know. Maybe, if I explained. No! Victoria turned from the window. You can't explain. Not yet. First, we need to know exactly what we're working with. These documents are a start, but they're not enough. We need the source files, the full transaction records, maybe internal communications, the kind of evidence that can't be explained away. How do we get that? I have access to the company servers, financial records going back 20 years. If the original documents exist, I can find them. Won't your father notice you looking? Not if I'm careful. I access financial records all the time. It's part of my job. As long as I don't download or print anything suspicious, it should look like routine review. Ryan studied her face. You're really going to do this? I haven't decided yet. Yes, you have. She almost smiled. Stop telling me what I've decided. Then stop pretending you haven't. They stood looking at each other across the cabin, the folder of documents between them, and Ryan realized that something fundamental had shifted. They weren't driver and CEO anymore. They weren't even really strangers. They were two people about to make a choice that would change everything. If we do this, Victoria said quietly, there's no going back. Once we start digging, once we involve other people, it becomes real. You need to be absolutely certain. I've been certain for 2 years. Even if it means putting Emma at risk? Emma's already at risk. We're all at risk as long as people like your father can buy their way out of consequences. Ryan picked up the folder. My dad spent his whole career trying to hold powerful people accountable. He died for it. I owe him this. You don't owe dead people anything. Maybe not, but I owe Emma a world where the truth matters. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay. Okay. Okay, we do this together, but we do it smart. No rushing, no mistakes. We build a case that can't be ignored and we bring it to people who can act on it. And your father? My father made his choices. Now he lives with them. Ryan felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. He wasn't alone in this anymore. For better or worse, he had an ally. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the documents more carefully, with Victoria explaining what each one meant and how it fit into the larger pattern. She had a yellow legal pad she'd found in a drawer, and she made notes in handwriting so neat it looked printed. This account here, she said, tapping one of the pages, it's registered to a shell company in Delaware. That's not unusual, but the timing of the transfers suggests it was specifically created to receive these funds. Can we trace who owns it? Difficult but not impossible. Delaware makes it easy to hide ownership, but there are ways. Court orders, subpoenas, following the money further down the chain. That takes time. Everything takes time. That's how people like my father get away with it. They count on everyone else getting tired or distracted or bought off before the truth comes out. Ryan thought about his father spending months on investigations that never made it to print because sources disappeared or editors killed the story. My dad used to say the system protects itself. He was right, but systems have weak points. We just need to find them. As the sun started to set, early this far north, this time of year, they made dinner from the last of the canned goods. Victoria had stopped complaining about the food. She ate mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. What are you thinking about? Ryan asked. Logistics, timeline, who needs to know what and when? She set down her spoon. After we get out of here tomorrow, we can't see each other, not publicly. If my father suspects we're working together, he'll shut everything down. So what? We just go back to being strangers? For now. I'll do my research from inside the company. You work on finding your father's editor. See if he's willing to help. We communicate through burner phones. Nothing traceable. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things over the years. I just never had the courage to act on them. And now? Victoria looked at him. Now I'm tired of being complicit. They cleaned up dinner in silence. The fire had burned down to embers again. Tomorrow they'd be rescued, returned to their separate lives, and this strange interlude would be over. But something had been set in motion that couldn't be stopped. Ryan found himself not wanting the night to end, not because he was afraid of what came next, but because here in this cabin, things had been simple, clear. Tomorrow, everything would get complicated again. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Why Emma? Why that name? Ryan smiled. Her mother chose it, said it meant universal, whole. She wanted Emma to feel like she could be anything, do anything, no limits. That's beautiful. Yeah. She was good at things like that, finding meaning in small choices, making everything feel important. You miss her. Every day. But it's different now. The grief isn't as sharp. Mostly I just miss having someone to share Emma with, someone who gets why she's so amazing. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Do you think you'll marry again? I don't know. Maybe. If I find someone who doesn't mind that Emma comes first. Always. That's not a bad thing. Some people think it is. I dated someone last year who kept saying I needed to make time for us. But the time I had was the time I had. I couldn't manufacture more of it. What happened? She left. Said I wasn't emotionally available. Ryan shrugged. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she wasn't the right person. Maybe. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars visible through the window for the first time since they'd arrived. Ryan thought about making another comment about the weather, about how they'd be leaving soon, but he didn't want to break the moment. Ryan? Victoria said, using his first name for the first time. Yeah? Thank you for trusting me, for showing me those documents when you had no reason to. I had a reason. I needed help. Still, you took a risk. That means something. He met her eyes in the firelight. You took a risk too. Looking at that evidence when you could have walked away. I don't think I could have. Not really. No, I don't think so either. Something passed between them then. Not quite attraction, not quite friendship, but something in between. A recognition of shared purpose. Of two people who'd been lonely in different ways finding unexpected company. Victoria stood up. We should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Yeah. They went through the now familiar routine of getting ready for bed in the tiny cabin. Victoria took the bathroom first. Ryan banked the fire and double-checked that the door was secure. When they finally settled onto opposite sides of the bed, the space between them felt both smaller and larger than it had the night before. Ryan? Victoria said in the darkness. Yeah? What if we can't prove it? What if we do all this work and it's not enough? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't just accept it. That's not very comforting. I know, but it's true. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, My father used to tell me that comfort was for weak people, that strong people didn't need reassurance. Your father was wrong about a lot of things. Yeah, he was. Ryan turned onto his side, facing the wall. For what it's worth, I think you're stronger than he ever gave you credit for. You don't know that. I do, because you're here. Because you're willing to burn down everything he built even though it costs you too. Maybe I'm just self-destructive. Or maybe you're finally free. Victoria didn't answer, but in the darkness, Ryan heard her breathing shift. Not quite crying, but something close. He didn't say anything. Some moments didn't need words. They lay there in the quiet, two people on the edge of a decision that would change their lives, and waited for morning to come. Ryan woke to the sound of helicopter rotors. The noise was distant at first, then grew louder, cutting through the early morning silence like a blade. He sat up, disoriented, and saw Victoria already at the window. They're here, she said. Ryan joined her. Through the trees, he could see a helicopter circling, looking for a clear place to land. It was red and white, probably a private rescue service, not military or police. That was fast, he said. I told you, my father has resources. They gathered their things quickly. The cabin looked smaller in the morning light, shabbier. Ryan felt a strange reluctance to leave it, like they were abandoning something important, which was stupid. It was just a cabin. They'd only been here 2 days, but when he looked at Victoria, he saw the same feeling reflected in her face. The helicopter landed in the clearing, snow blowing in every direction from the rotors. 2 men got out, a pilot and what looked like a paramedic. They waved toward the cabin. Ready? Victoria asked. No, Ryan said honestly. But I don't think that matters. They walked out together into the cold morning air. The men greeted Victoria by name, asked if she was injured, treated Ryan like he was invisible. Within minutes, they were loaded into the helicopter with heated blankets and bottles of water. As they lifted off, Ryan looked down at the cabin growing smaller beneath them. From the air, it looked peaceful, like nothing had happened there, like two people's lives hadn't fundamentally changed within its walls. Victoria sat across from him, her corporate mask firmly back in place. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. To anyone watching, they were just a CEO and her driver, strangers brought together by circumstance and nothing more. But when the paramedic turned away to speak to the pilot, Victoria caught Ryan's eye. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at him for 3 seconds that felt like a promise. Then she turned to the window and watched the mountains fall away beneath them. The war had begun. The helicopter dropped Ryan at a small regional airport 40 miles from the city. No explanation, no goodbye from Victoria. Just the paramedic handing him a business card with a phone number written on the back in pen, telling him his payment would be processed within 3 business days, and then they were gone. Ryan stood in the parking lot watching the helicopter disappear into gray sky, feeling like he'd dreamed the last 2 days. His Honda was still buried somewhere on a mountain road. His phone was dead. He had $17 in his wallet and no way to get home. He walked into the airport terminal and found a payphone that looked like it hadn't been used since 2005. He called his neighbor collect. "Ryan?" Margaret's voice was sharp with relief and worry. "Where the hell have you been?" "Long story, is Emma okay?" "She's fine. She's been staying with me since you didn't come back. She's at school right now." A pause. "Ryan, what happened? The temp agency called looking for you, said their client was missing and you were the driver." "We got caught in the storm. We're both fine. Can you pick me up?" "I'm at Ridgeview Regional Airport." "That's 2 hours away." "I know, I'm sorry. I'll pay you for gas. Don't be stupid. I'm coming. Just stay there." She hung up before he could thank her. Ryan bought a coffee with his last few dollars and sat in a plastic chair that hurt his back, watching CNN play silently on a mounted television. The storm that had trapped them was national news now. 30 inches in some areas, multiple highways closed, 6 deaths attributed to accidents and exposure. They showed aerial footage of stranded cars and collapsed roofs. He thought about Victoria in that cabin, eating canned beans and playing cards. It seemed impossible that she was the same person he was watching now on the news. A brief clip of her being helped off the helicopter at some private airfield, surrounded by assistants and security, her face perfectly composed as she declined to comment. The crawl at the bottom of the screen read, "Billionaire CEO rescued after mountain storm. No injuries reported." No mention of the driver. Ryan supposed that was appropriate. He'd always been invisible. Margaret arrived 3 hours later, driving her ancient Subaru with Emma buckled into the back seat. The moment Ryan opened the door, Emma launched herself at him. "Daddy!" He caught her, held her tight enough that she squeaked, "Hey, baby, I missed you." "You were gone forever. Margaret said you got stuck in snow." "I did, but I'm okay, see? All in one piece." Emma pulled back to examine his face seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but you smell bad." "Yeah, I probably do." Margaret drove them home while Emma chattered about everything that had happened in the 2 days he'd been gone. A spelling test she'd aced, a boy named Connor who'd pulled her hair at recess, a drawing she'd made of a dinosaur that her teacher had hung on the wall. Normal life. Small problems. Nothing about offshore accounts or dead fathers or CEOs with too many secrets. Ryan let the words wash over him and tried to remember what normal felt like. Back at the apartment, Margaret made him eat leftover casserole while Emma showed him the dinosaur drawing, which actually did look like a dinosaur this time, not just a blob. After Emma went to play in her room, Margaret sat across from him at the kitchen table. "You look like hell," she said. "Thanks. Want to tell me what really happened?" "We got stuck in a storm, found emergency shelter, waited it out." That's the official version. What's the real one? Ryan thought about the folder still in his jacket pocket, about Victoria's face when she'd read those documents, about the promise they'd made to each other in the darkness. "The real one's complicated," he said. "Everything with you is complicated lately." "What's that supposed to mean?" Margaret sighed. It means you've been different since James died. Angry, restless. Emma notices it even if she doesn't say anything. I'm fine. You're not. And whatever happened up on that mountain, it didn't help. You look like someone who just made a decision they can't take back. Ryan met her eyes. Margaret had been his neighbor for 5 years, had helped him through Sarah's death and James's funeral and 100 smaller crises. She knew him better than almost anyone. Maybe I did, he said quietly. Is it going to blow up in your face? Probably. Is Emma safe? I don't know. Margaret reached across the table and gripped his hand hard. Then you need to think very carefully about what you're doing, because that little girl in there needs her father, not a hero, not revenge, just you, alive and present. I know. Do you? Because James thought he was doing the right thing too, and look where that got him. Ryan pulled his hand back. That's not fair. None of this is fair. But you have a daughter. James didn't. That changes things. So I should just let it go? Pretend it didn't happen? I'm saying you need to decide what matters more, the truth or Emma's father. She stood up, gathered her things. At the door, she turned back. The temp agency called, said you won't be getting paid since you didn't complete the job, and they won't be using you again. Great. Ryan, I know. I'll figure it out. After Margaret left, Ryan sat at the table with his father's folder and tried to figure out his next move. Victoria had said they needed to move carefully, build an airtight case, but she was inside the company with access to records. He was just a driver who'd lost his job for getting stuck in a storm. He needed to find Marcus Brennan. His father had mentioned Marcus maybe a dozen times over the years. His old editor at the paper, the guy who'd given him his first big break, who'd fought to keep controversial stories in print when publishers wanted them killed. But James had never introduced them, and Ryan had no idea how to reach him. He spent the evening searching online using the library's public computer while Emma did homework beside him. Marcus Brennan had retired from the paper 5 years ago. No social media presence, no public contact information. Ryan found an old article mentioning he'd moved to a town 2 hours north, but no address. Dead end. Or maybe not. Ryan searched for this paper's current staff directory and found a name he recognized, Linda Chen, who'd worked with his father on a story about housing discrimination back when Ryan was in high school. He wrote down her phone number. That night, after Emma fell asleep, he sat in the kitchen with a burner phone he'd bought at a convenience store and dialed. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. Hello? Linda Chen? Who's asking? My name is Ryan Hayes. I'm James Hayes' son. Silence. Then, cautiously, I heard about James. I'm very sorry. Thank you. I'm trying to reach Marcus Brennan. I know he worked with my father. I can't help you. Please, it's important. It's about the story my father was working on when he died. I don't know anything about that. But Marcus might. If you could just give me a way to contact him, listen to me carefully. Linda's voice dropped. Your father came to me 3 months before he died. Asked me to look into some things. Financial records, shell companies, the kind of stuff that gets lawyers involved. I told him I couldn't help. I have 2 kids, a mortgage, and a job I can't afford to lose. I'm not asking you to investigate anything. I just need to talk to Marcus. Marcus won't talk to you. He's been burned too many times. After what happened to your father, he told me he was done with Crusader journalism. Said he was too old to die for a story nobody would print anyway. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. So that's it? Everyone just walks away? Everyone except you, apparently. But you have a kid, don't you? A daughter? What does that have to do with anything? It means you should think about what your father would want, and I don't think he'd want you following him into the ground. She hung up. Ryan sat staring at the phone, feeling the first real tremor of doubt. Margaret was right. Linda was right. He had Emma to think about. What was he doing chasing ghosts when his daughter needed him alive and employed? But then he thought about his father's handwriting on those documents, about Victoria's face when she'd admitted her father was probably guilty, about the question his father had written next to Victoria's name, one question mark that represented years of uncertainty and fear. He couldn't walk away. Not yet. The burner phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hayes, it's V. Don't respond. Just read. Accessed company servers. Found transaction records matching your docs. Worse than we thought. Total amount closer to 250 million. Multiple offshore accounts. Pattern suggests ongoing operation, not historical. Meeting my father for dinner tomorrow. Will probe carefully. Destroy this phone after reading. New number in 3 days. Ryan read it twice, then deleted the message and removed the battery from the phone. Tomorrow he'd smash it and throw the pieces in separate dumpsters. That's what people did in movies, anyway. He looked at Emma's bedroom door, closed and quiet. Inside, his daughter slept with her stuffed rabbit, dreaming about dinosaurs and spelling tests and all the normal things 6-year-olds dreamed about. Margaret was right. He should walk away. But Victoria was already diving deeper, and if he quit now, she'd be alone in this. That felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. The next 2 days were brutal. Ryan had no job, no prospects, and bills that didn't care about his unemployment. He spent mornings dropping off resumes at temp agencies and construction companies. Afternoons, he picked up Emma from school and helped with homework and made dinner from whatever was cheapest at the store. Nights, he lay awake thinking about offshore accounts and helicopter rides, and the way Victoria had looked at him in the darkness of that cabin. On the third day, a new burner phone arrived in his mailbox. No return address. Inside was a phone with a single contact saved. V. Ryan waited until Emma was asleep, then called. Victoria answered on the first ring. Hayes? You sent me a phone. Easier than leaving messages, more secure. How was dinner with your father? A long pause. Illuminating. He spent 2 hours telling me about a new acquisition he's planning, pharmaceutical company in Nevada. He was very excited about their profit margins. And I checked. The company exists, but it's barely solvent. Half its assets are tied up in litigation. The only reason to acquire it would be if you were planning to use it for something other than legitimate business. Like what? Money laundering would be my guess. Buy a failing company cheap, pump money through it disguised as investments. Clean funds come out the other side. Victoria's voice was tight. When I asked him about due diligence, he patted my hand and told me not to worry about details, that he'd handle everything. He doesn't trust you. No, he thinks I'm competent but naive, too concerned with optics and regulations to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture being crime. Yes. Ryan heard something in her voice, exhaustion or despair or both. Are you okay? I had dinner with my father knowing he probably killed yours, so no, I'm not okay. But I'm functional, which is what matters. She took a breath. I'm going to Nevada next week. Official company business, reviewing the acquisition target. While I'm there, I'll see what I can find. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. Victoria, I need you to do something while I'm gone. Find Marcus Brennan. I tried. He won't talk to me. Try harder. We need someone outside the company who can verify what we find. Someone with credibility and connections. Marcus fits that profile. He's retired. He told someone he's done with this kind of journalism. Then convince him to unretire. Tell him your father died for this story. Tell him we have proof. Tell him whatever you have to. Victoria's voice softened slightly. We can't do this alone, Ryan. We need allies. I'll try. Don't try. Do it. Because if I go to Nevada and find what I think I'm going to find, we'll need to move fast. And I can't move fast if I'm the only person who knows. Okay. How's Emma? The question surprised him. She's good? Asked me yesterday why I was so tired all the time. What did you tell her? That grown-ups have to worry about boring stuff like bills and jobs. Did she buy it? Not really. She's perceptive. She gets that from you. Ryan almost smiled. I should go. It's late. Ryan? Victoria said before he could hang up. Be careful. My father has people watching for anyone asking questions about Hale Industries. If you start digging into Marcus, they might notice. I'll be careful. I mean it. These people don't just kill stories, they kill threats. I know. After they hung up, Ryan sat in the dark kitchen holding the burner phone and thinking about threats. He'd spent 2 years being angry about his father's death, but anger was abstract. Now, talking to Victoria, hearing the fear in her voice, it became concrete. They were going after someone who had unlimited resources and no conscience. Someone who'd already killed once to protect his secrets. Someone who saw Ryan and Victoria as nothing more than problems to be eliminated. Margaret was right. He should walk away. But instead he started planning how to find Marcus Brennan. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ryan was at the grocery store with Emma, letting her pick out cereal, when he ran into Daniel Kim, an old classmate from high school who'd become a real estate attorney. "Ryan Hayes," Daniel said, grinning. "I heard you were still in town. How's life?" "Complicated. You?" "Same. Too much work, not enough sleep. The lawyer's life." He noticed Emma examining cereal boxes with intense concentration. "This your daughter?" "Yeah, Emma, say hi to Mr. Kim." Emma waved without looking away from the cereal. Daniel laughed. "She's got focus." "Listen, I heard about your dad. That was rough. He was a good guy." "Thanks. Actually, I ran into someone at a conference last year who knew him, Marcus Brennan, used to be his editor." Ryan's pulse spiked. "You know Marcus?" "Not well, but we're both on a board together, media ethics nonprofit, totally boring. He mentioned working with your dad back in the day." Daniel pulled out his phone. "I think I still have his email if you want it." Yes, that would be great." Daniel sent the contact info, they exchanged pleasantries, and then Ryan was walking toward the checkout with Emma and an email address that felt like gold. That night, after Emma went to bed, Ryan wrote and deleted 6 drafts before settling on something simple. "Mr. Brennan, my name is Ryan Hayes. I'm James Hayes' son. I have information about the story he was working on when he died. I need your help. If you're willing to talk, please call this number." He included the burner phone number and hit send before he could second-guess himself. 2 days passed. No response. Ryan tried not to obsess about it, but obsessing was all he could do. He checked the burner phone every hour. Jumped every time it buzzed with spam messages. Started to think maybe Linda had been right. Marcus was done, and no amount of information would change that. Then, on the 3rd day, the phone rang. "This is Ryan," he answered. "Marcus Brennan." The voice was gravelly, older. "You're James's son." "Yes, sir." "He talked about you sometimes. Said you were smart. Said you were good with your hands." "He talked about you too. Said you were the only editor who never killed a story for the wrong reasons." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "He said that? That's generous. I killed plenty of stories, usually because I was scared of getting sued or fired. But not his stories." "Not usually. Your father was persuasive." A pause. "I was sorry to hear about the accident." "It wasn't an accident." Silence. Then, "You have proof of that?" "I have documents, financial records, evidence of fraud at Hale Industries going back 8 years. My father was investigating it when he died." "And you think they killed him to shut him up?" "Yes." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet. But I'm working with someone on the inside. We're building a case." "Who's the inside source?" Ryan hesitated. "I can't say. Not yet." "Then why are you calling me?" "Because when we're ready to go public, we'll need someone people trust to tell the story. Someone with credibility. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You know what you're asking?" "I know it's dangerous." "Dangerous is an understatement. Hale Industries has lawyers who can bury you in motions. They have connections in law enforcement, in government, in media. They can make your life hell." "They already did. They killed my father." "And you think revenge is going to bring him back?" "No, but justice might mean his death wasn't for nothing." Marcus exhaled heavily. "I'm 73 years old. I'm retired. I have grandkids I'd like to see grow up." "I understand. But—" Marcus stopped. "Your father was a good man, one of the best journalists I ever worked with. If someone killed him for doing his job, then yeah, that pisses me off." Ryan felt hope flicker in his chest. "So you'll help?" "I'll look at what you have. That's all I'm promising. If it's solid, if there's a real story there, we'll talk. But I'm not sticking my neck out for conspiracy theories and hunches." "It's more than that." "Then prove it. Bring me your documents. Let me see what you've got." They arranged to meet 3 days later at a diner 2 towns over. Marcus insisted on the location, public enough to be safe, remote enough to be discreet. Ryan agreed to everything. After they hung up, Ryan immediately called Victoria's burner number. She answered on the first ring. Hayes? I found Marcus. He's willing to meet. That's good. What did you tell him? That we have documents, that my father was investigating Hale Industries, that we need help going public. Did you mention me? No, but he'll figure it out eventually. Let me worry about that. When are you meeting him? 3 days? Perfect. I'll be back from Nevada by then. We can coordinate what he needs to see. How's it going out there? Victoria's voice dropped. It's worse than I thought. The pharmaceutical company is a shell within a shell. On paper, it looks legitimate. But when you dig deeper, half the executives don't exist. The clinical trials are fabricated. The whole thing is a front. For what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But based on the transaction patterns, it looks like they're using it to process funds from multiple sources. Drug money? Maybe. Or international investors who can't legally operate in the US. That's way beyond financial fraud. I know. Which is why we need Marcus. Because this isn't just about exposing my father anymore. This is about taking down an entire criminal operation. Ryan felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. Victoria, if we do this, I know what we're risking. Believe me, I've thought about it. She paused. My assistant noticed I've been accessing old financial records. She asked me about it yesterday. I told her I was doing research for a board presentation, but I don't think she believed me. Is she going to say something to your father? I don't know. Maybe. I need to move faster. Or we could stop, walk away before it gets worse. Could you? Could you actually walk away knowing what we know? Ryan thought about Emma sleeping in the next room, about the bills on his kitchen table, about Margaret's warning. No, he admitted. I couldn't. Then we keep going. We meet Marcus, we show him everything, and we let him decide if it's enough to print. And if it's not, then at least we tried. They hung up. Ryan sat in the darkness, listening to Emma's soft breathing through the thin walls of their apartment, and wondered if trying was going to be enough. The next 3 days crawled by. Ryan did day labor jobs, helped a guy move furniture, painted someone's garage, unloaded trucks at a warehouse. The work was mindless and physical, which helped. He couldn't obsess about offshore accounts while hauling boxes. Emma noticed something was different. She kept asking him questions. Why was he so quiet? Where was he going at night when she was asleep? Why did he keep checking his phone? He deflected as best he could, but she was 6, not stupid. Are you in trouble, Daddy? She asked one night at dinner. No, baby. Why would you think that? Because you look worried all the time, like when Mom was sick. Ryan felt his chest tighten. I'm not sick, I promise. But something's wrong. He couldn't lie to her, not directly. Grown-up stuff is complicated right now, but I'm handling it. Is it about Grandpa? Ryan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What makes you say that? Because you have his picture on your desk, and sometimes I see you looking at it like you're sad. He set down his fork. Yeah, baby, some of it is about Grandpa. Do you miss him? Every day. Me too. He used to make funny faces. He did. He was good at that. Emma pushed her peas around her plate. If you're doing something about Grandpa, that's okay, even if it's hard. What do you mean? Mom used to say that hard things are still worth doing if they're important. Is this important? Ryan looked at his daughter, this small person who understood more than she should have to, and felt tears sting his eyes. Yeah, it's important. Okay. Then it's okay if you're worried. Just don't forget to come back. But come back from where? From the hard thing. Mom forgot to come back. The words hit him like a punch. Emma said it matter-of-factly, without accusation, just stating a truth she'd learned at 3 years old. Mom didn't forget, Ryan said carefully. She couldn't come back, but I can, and I will, I promise. Emma nodded and went back to her peas. Ryan sat across from her and made a silent vow that whatever happened with Victoria, with Marcus, with this whole impossible situation, he would keep that promise. He would come back. The meeting with Marcus was set for 2 in the afternoon at a place called Rosie's Diner in a town Ryan had never heard of. He arranged for Margaret to pick up Emma from school, told her he had a job interview, and drove his barely functional Honda 2 hours to a restaurant that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1973. Marcus was already there, sitting in a back booth with coffee and a newspaper. He was exactly what Ryan had imagined. White hair, lined face, sharp eyes that had seen too much and didn't trust easily. Ryan slid into the seat across from him. "Mr. Brennan." "Marcus, and you look like your father." He folded the newspaper. "You bring the documents?" Ryan pulled the folder from his jacket and set it on the table. Marcus opened it, started reading. His expression didn't change, but his fingers moved faster, flipping pages, going back to cross-reference dates and numbers. A waitress came by. Ryan ordered coffee he didn't want. Marcus didn't look up. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, Marcus closed the folder and leaned back. "This is explosive," he said quietly. "Can you verify it?" "Some of it. These transaction records. I'd need to see the source documents, the full accounting trail. But the pattern is clear. Someone was moving massive amounts of money offshore, deliberately obscuring the paper trail." He tapped one of the pages. "Your father circled Victoria Hale's name. He wasn't sure if she was involved. And you? Are you sure?" Ryan met Marcus's eyes. "I'm working with her. She's the inside source." Marcus's expression hardened. "You're trusting a Hale?" "I'm trusting someone who showed me documents that implicate her own father, who's risking everything to help expose this. Or she's playing you, feeding you just enough to seem credible while actually protecting the company. That's not what's happening." "How do you know?" "Because I spent 2 days trapped in a cabin with her. Because I watched her read these documents and saw her face when she realized what her father had done. Because she had every opportunity to walk away, and she didn't." Marcus studied him. "You're sleeping with her?" "No." "But you want to." Ryan felt his face heat. "That's not relevant." "It's extremely relevant. You're emotionally compromised." "So what? Does that make the documents fake? Does that change what's in these records?" "No, but it means I can't trust your judgment about her, which means I need to verify everything independently before I touch this story." A woman slid into the booth next to Ryan without warning. He startled, started to protest, then saw who it was. Victoria. She was dressed down, jeans, simple sweater, hair pulled back. Without the corporate armor, she looked younger and more vulnerable. "You weren't supposed to be here," Ryan said. "I changed my mind. Marcus needs to know who he's working with." She looked at Marcus. "I'm Victoria Hale, and everything Ryan told you is true." Marcus's face was unreadable. "Everything?" "My father has been using Hale Industries to launder money for at least 8 years, probably longer. The pharmaceutical acquisition in Nevada is the latest vehicle. I have documentation showing transaction patterns that match known money laundering operations." She pulled out a USB drive and set it on the table. "Everything I've found is on here. Financial records, internal communications, acquisition documents, more than enough to open an investigation." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why what?" "Why are you doing this? This is your family, your company, your legacy. Why burn it all down?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Because Ryan's father died asking questions I should have asked years ago. Because I've spent my whole life building something on a foundation of lies. And because if I don't do this, I'm complicit." She met Marcus's eyes. "I don't expect you to trust me, but trust the documents. They speak for themselves." Marcus picked up the USB drive, turned it over in his fingers. "If I publish this, you'll be destroyed. Your father will make sure of it." "I know. You'll lose everything." "Not everything, just the things that were built on someone else's pain." Marcus looked between them, Victoria sitting rigid and determined, Ryan trying not to show how terrified he was, both of them balanced on the edge of a decision that would change their lives forever. "I'll need 2 weeks," Marcus said finally, "to verify everything, bring in forensic accountants, build an airtight case. Can you hold on that long without your father finding out?" Victoria nodded. "I can try." "And you," Marcus looked at Ryan, "you need to keep your daughter safe. If this goes public, Hale will come after everyone, including her." "I know." "Do you?" "Because your father thought he could protect himself too, and look where that got him." The words hung in the air, cruel but true. Ryan felt Victoria's hand find his under the table, squeezing once before letting go. "We know what we're risking," Victoria said. The question is whether you're willing to help us. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the USB drive and slipped it into his pocket. 2 weeks, he said. Don't contact me until then. Don't do anything that might tip off your father. Just go back to your normal lives and wait. And then? Ryan asked. And then we burn it all down. The 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Ryan went back to his life, day labor jobs, picking up Emma from school, making dinner, pretending everything was normal. But every time his phone rang, his heart jumped. Every time someone knocked on the door, he checked the peephole twice. He'd moved from careful to paranoid, and he knew it. Emma noticed. She always noticed. You keep looking at the door like a bad guy's gonna come in, she said one night while they were watching a movie. No bad guys, baby. I'm just tired. Margaret says when grown-ups say they're tired, they usually mean something else. Margaret talks too much. She says that too. Ryan pulled her closer on the couch. On the television, animated characters were having problems that could be solved in 90 minutes. He wished real life worked that way. Victoria called once during those 2 weeks, using yet another burner phone. Her voice was strained. My father knows something's wrong, she said without preamble. Ryan's stomach dropped. How? He asked me yesterday why I'd been accessing old financial records. Said someone had flagged unusual activity on my login. What did you tell him? That I was doing research for a presentation on company history. He didn't believe me. He's having my assistant monitor my calendar, my emails, everything. She paused. Ryan, I think he's preparing for something. Like what? Like making sure all the evidence disappears before anyone can act on it. The Nevada acquisition closed 3 days ago. Within hours, half the documentation I'd copied was scrubbed from the servers. Can he do that? He can do whatever he wants. It's his company. I'm just the CEO on paper. Ryan heard the bitterness in her voice. Are you safe? I don't know. Probably. He wouldn't do anything obvious, but I'm being followed. Black sedan, different drivers, always 3 cars back. Very professional. You need to get out. And go where? If I run, he'll know for certain. I have to stay, act normal, give Marcus time to build the case. Victoria, I know what I'm doing. Just keep Emma safe. Keep yourself safe. And trust that Marcus knows what he's doing. She hung up before Ryan could argue. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running scenarios. If Victoria's father knew something was wrong, how long until he figured out what? How long until he connected Victoria to Ryan? How long until someone came asking questions about the driver who'd been stranded in that cabin? Around 3 a.m, he got up and checked the locks on every door and window, made sure his phone was charged, pulled out the folder he'd hidden in Emma's closet behind her winter clothes and moved it somewhere better. Inside the lining of his old duffel bag in the storage unit he rented for $15 a month. He was being paranoid, he knew that, but paranoia kept people alive. The break came on day 13. Ryan was at a construction site hauling drywall when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hayes, he answered. It's Marcus. We need to meet. Tonight. What happened? Not on the phone. Same place as before, 7 o'clock. Come alone. He hung up. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly he had to sit down on a stack of lumber. This was it. Whatever Marcus had found, whatever he'd verified, tonight they'd know if it was enough. He finished the job, picked up Emma, dropped her at Margaret's with a story about a late job interview. Margaret gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but wasn't going to push. Emma hugged him extra tight. You're coming back, right? She asked. Always, baby. I promise. The drive to Rosie's diner felt longer than before. Ryan kept checking his mirrors, convinced he was being followed, but the road behind him stayed empty, just paranoia again. Marcus was in the same booth. This time he wasn't alone. 2 other people sat with him. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a laptop, and a younger guy with the nervous energy of someone who'd had too much coffee. Ryan Hayes, meet Catherine Morris and James Chen. Catherine's a forensic accountant. James is a data journalist. They've been helping me verify everything. Ryan slid into the booth. And? And it's worse than your father thought. Marcus nodded at Catherine, who opened her laptop. The documents you provided showed systematic money laundering, Catherine said. What we found goes deeper. The offshore accounts Victoria gave us access to, They're connected to shell companies in 7 countries. Those companies have contracts with Hale Industries subsidiaries for services that were never actually performed. The money flows through, gets cleaned, and comes back as legitimate business income. How much money? Ryan asked. We can prove at least 400 million over the last decade, but based on the patterns, we think it's closer to $1 billion. Ryan felt dizzy. $1 billion. And that's just the laundering operation, James added. The Nevada pharmaceutical company? It's being used to move product, not drugs, at least not primarily, but medical equipment acquired overseas using dirty money, then sold domestically at inflated prices. The difference gets kicked back to the original investors. Who are the investors? Marcus leaned forward. That's where it gets interesting. Best we can tell, and we had to dig through a lot of layers, the money's coming from international sources. Some of it's probably criminal, but some of it's also foreign nationals who can't legally invest in U.S. companies. Hale Industries is giving them a way to park money in America through legitimate-looking business operations. Is that illegal? Some of it violates financial regulations. Some of it violates sanctions. And all of it would get the company investigated by the SEC, the FBI, probably Interpol. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. We have documentation for all of it. Bank records, wire transfers, internal memos from Hale Industries showing they knew exactly what they were doing. Ryan stared at the folder. This is enough? It's more than enough. This is the kind of story that wins awards, the kind that brings down companies. And the people running them. Yes. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, relief mixed with fear. What about my father? Can you prove they killed him? Marcus's expression softened. No, I'm sorry. We found evidence he was investigating all this, that he'd contacted sources at Hale Industries. But proving someone ordered his death? That would require witness testimony, hard evidence we just don't have. So we can prove the fraud but not the murder. We can prove the fraud. We can show your father was investigating it when he died. We can let people draw their own conclusions. Marcus paused. It's not perfect justice, Ryan, but it's something. Ryan thought about his father's funeral, about the questions that had haunted him for 2 years, about Emma asking why Grandpa wasn't coming back. This wouldn't bring James Hayes back, but maybe it would mean his death hadn't been for nothing. When do we publish? Ryan asked. I've got a meeting with my old publisher tomorrow morning. If he agrees, and he will, this story's too big not to. We publish in 3 days. Sunday edition, front page, full investigation with all supporting documents posted online. What about Victoria? She needs to be ready. The moment this hits, her father will move against her. Legally, financially, probably personally. She'll need a lawyer, maybe more than one. Does she know? I called her this afternoon. She said she's prepared. Ryan wondered if anyone could really be prepared for watching their entire world collapse. What about Emma? What about me? You'll be named in the story as James Hayes' son, the person who brought this evidence forward. You'll probably get interview requests, maybe book offers. You'll definitely get threats. Marcus met his eyes. Your life is about to get very complicated. More complicated than it already is. Yes. They talked for another hour, going over details and timelines. Catherine showed Ryan how they'd traced the money, the specific transactions that proved intent. James explained how they'd verified Victoria's documents against public records and found everything matched. It was solid. It was real. It was going to blow up the entire Hale empire. When Ryan finally left the diner, it was almost 10 o'clock. He drove home in a daze, his mind racing with everything that was about to happen. By Sunday, the story would be public. By Monday, the investigations would start. By next week, his life and Victoria's would be completely different. He picked up Emma from Margaret's. She was already in pajamas, half asleep on the couch. Did you get the job? Margaret asked. Something like that. She studied his face. Whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. I will. I mean it, Ryan. That little girl needs you. I know, and I'm going to be here. I promise. He carried Emma home and tucked her into bed. She mumbled something about dinosaurs and hugged her rabbit tighter. Ryan sat on the edge of her bed and watched her sleep, thinking about all the ways the next few days could go wrong. His phone buzzed. Text from a new number. It's V. Need to see you. Tomorrow. Can you get away? Ryan typed back. Where? The cabin. He stared at the message. The cabin where this had all started, where they'd made the decision to go to war against her father. It was a 4-hour drive, assuming the roads were clear. Why there? He texted. Because it's the only place I know we won't be followed. Please. Ryan looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, at the small apartment that was barely holding together, at the life he'd been trying so hard to protect. Then he typed. What time? Noon. I'll meet you there. He spent the next morning making arrangements. Margaret agreed to watch Emma for the day. Another job interview, he said, hating himself for the lie. He packed a bag with supplies just in case, though he wasn't sure what he was preparing for. The drive to the cabin felt surreal. It was the same route he'd driven 3 weeks ago as Victoria's driver, but everything had changed. The storm was long gone. The roads were clear and dry. And he was no longer just a driver taking someone from point A to point B. The cabin looked different in winter sunlight, smaller, less dramatic. Just a building in the woods, nothing more. Victoria's car was already there, not the Mercedes, but a small sedan that looked like a rental. She stood on the porch waiting for him. You came, she said. You asked. They went inside. Someone had cleaned since they'd left. The fireplace was swept, the blankets folded, everything neat and impersonal, like their time here had never happened. Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the trees. She was wearing jeans and a sweater again, her hair down. Without the corporate armor, she looked vulnerable in a way that made Ryan's chest ache. Marcus called me, she said. Told me the story's running Sunday. He told me too. Are you ready? I don't think anyone can be ready for this. No, probably not. She turned to face him. My father knows. About us working together, about the investigation, everything. But Ryan felt ice in his veins. How? My assistant. She's been monitoring my communications, my travel, everything. She reported back to him yesterday. He called me into his office this morning. Victoria's voice was steady, but Ryan could see her hands shaking. He offered me money. $50 million if I back off, if I issue a statement saying Marcus's story is fabricated, if I stand by him publicly. What did you say? I said no. And he told me I was no longer CEO of Hale Industries, effective immediately, that I was no longer welcome in any company facility, that I had 24 hours to clean out my office before security escorted me out. She laughed, but it sounded broken. 20 years of my life, building that company, trying to make it something I could be proud of. And he erased me in 5 minutes. Ryan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, her breath coming in sharp gasps that might have been crying or might have been fury. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. I made my choice. I knew what it would cost. Still, I'm sorry. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the cabin where this had all started. Outside, winter birds called to each other. Inside, two people tried to figure out how to survive what came next. There's more, Victoria said, pulling back. My father's lawyers filed an emergency injunction this morning, trying to block Marcus's story. They're claiming it violates confidentiality agreements, that the documents were obtained illegally. It won't hold. Marcus has too much independent verification, but it'll delay publication by maybe a week. A week for your father to do what? Destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, make this all go away. She looked at Ryan. He's also going after you. What do you mean? He's filing for an investigation into your father's death, claiming James Hayes was an alcoholic who fabricated evidence against the company out of professional desperation. He's already got 3 journalists prepared to write stories questioning your father's credibility. Ryan felt rage flood through him. He's going to smear my father? He's going to try, but here's the thing. He's also offering you a deal. What kind of deal? Drop everything. Publicly state your father was wrong. Sign an NDA. In exchange, he'll give you $2 million and a job. Not driving. Something real. Something that would let you take care of Emma properly. Ryan stared at her. He thinks I'll take that? He thinks everyone has a price. That's how he's operated his whole life. What did you tell him? I told him you'd die before you sold out your father's memory. But he didn't believe me. He wants to meet with you. Tomorrow morning, his lawyer's office. He thinks if he can get you in a room, he can convince you. And you think I should go? Victoria met his eyes. I think you should do whatever protects Emma. If that means taking the money and walking away, I'll understand. You don't mean that. I do. Your daughter didn't ask for any of this. She deserves a father who's alive and present, not one who's fighting a battle he might lose. Ryan thought about Emma's question. You're coming back, right? About Margaret's warnings. About Linda Chen telling him his father would have wanted him to walk away. I can't, he said. Even if I wanted to, I can't. Because if I take his money, if I sign that NDA, then my father really did die for nothing. And I can't live with that. Victoria nodded slowly. Then we finish this. Together? Together. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Victoria had already hired lawyers, 3 of them, all with experience fighting powerful corporations. She'd moved her personal assets into accounts her father couldn't touch. She'd contacted the FBI and the SEC, offering to cooperate fully with any investigations. I'm burning every bridge, she said, making sure there's no way back. Because if I leave myself an exit, I'll take it. I know myself well enough to know that. That's not weakness. That's being human. My father would say it's the same thing. Your father's wrong about a lot of things. They made dinner from supplies Victoria had brought. Actual food, not canned goods. They ate at the small table and talked about what came after. Victoria didn't know. She'd spent her whole adult life being CEO of Hale Industries. Now she was just Victoria, with no job and no company, and a father who wanted to destroy her. What will you do? Ryan asked. I don't know. Something smaller. Something real. Maybe nothing for a while. She picked at her food. What about you? Keep raising Emma. Find actual steady work. Try to build something that doesn't collapse every time I look away. That sounds good? It sounds boring. Boring's underrated. They smiled at each other, and Ryan felt that same pull he'd felt in this cabin before, an attraction that was complicated by everything else happening between them. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. That night we first stayed here, when you told me about your father, were you planning to tell me the truth then? About knowing who I was? About taking the job because of my company? Ryan considered lying, then decided they'd had enough lies. No, I was planning to keep it secret, use you for information without you knowing. What changed? You did. You told me about your father, about the cost of what you'd built, and I realized you weren't just some corporate robot. You were a person who was trapped the same way I was. So you took pity on me? No, I recognized you. That's different. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you were my driver that day. Even with everything that's happened, I'm glad. Me too. The sun set early. They built a fire more out of nostalgia than necessity, sat on opposite ends of the couch the way they had before, except this time the space between them felt charged with possibility. What happens after Sunday? Victoria asked. After the story breaks and the investigations start? Chaos, probably. Media, lawyers, your father trying to destroy us both. And then? And then eventually it settles. The truth comes out or it doesn't. Justice happens or it doesn't. Life goes on. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's not complicated either. We survive it. That's all we can do. Victoria moved closer on the couch. Not quite touching him, but close enough that Ryan could feel the heat of her. I'm scared, she said quietly. Me too. What if we're wrong? What if Marcus's story doesn't change anything? What if my father just keeps winning? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't just accept it. That's what you said before. It's still true. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. Ryan put his arm around her and they sat there watching the fire burn down while the night grew cold outside. Stay, Victoria said. I am staying. No, I mean after this. After everything settles. Don't disappear on me. Ryan thought about his apartment and Emma and the life waiting for him back in the city. Then he thought about this woman who'd risked everything to do the right thing, who was just as scared and damaged as he was. I won't disappear, he promised. They fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, the fire turning to embers. When Ryan woke up near dawn, Victoria was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. Whether I'm brave or just self-destructive." "Both, probably." "Thanks. That's very reassuring." "You want reassurance or truth?" "With you, I think I get both." They drove back separately that morning. Before they left, Victoria kissed him, quick and fierce and desperate, like she was trying to memorize something before it disappeared. "For luck," she said. "We're going to need it." The story broke on Sunday morning just like Marcus said it would. Front page of a major national newspaper. Inside the Hale Empire, how a billion-dollar company built on fraud. The article was 20 pages long, meticulously documented, devastating. By noon, it had been picked up by every major news outlet. By evening, the FBI had announced an investigation. By Monday morning, 3 board members had resigned and trading of Hale Industries stock had been suspended. Ryan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, people wanting his story. He ignored most of them. Answered a few with careful, prepared statements. Focused on keeping Emma safe and away from cameras. Victoria called once. "Are you okay?" "Surviving. You?" "Same. My father's lawyers are claiming I stole proprietary documents. They're trying to have me arrested." "Will it work?" "No. I gave everything to the FBI voluntarily. I'm cooperating fully. But it's going to get uglier before it gets better." "I know." "Ryan, thank you. For not giving up. For believing this mattered." "Thank you for having the courage to blow it all up." They hung up. Ryan stood in his kitchen looking at Emma doing homework at the table, oblivious to the media circus happening outside, and felt something like peace. His father's death still didn't make sense. The investigation might never prove who'd killed him or why, but at least the truth was out now. At least the secrets had been exposed. It was something. The investigations took 6 months. The FBI, the SEC, state prosecutors, all digging through Hale Industries' records. What they found was worse than even Marcus's story had reported. Decades of fraud. Hundreds of millions moved through shell companies. Evidence of bribery, money laundering, potentially even connections to organized crime. Richard Hale was arrested on a Tuesday morning in May. Ryan watched it on the news, footage of him being led from his house in handcuffs, his lawyers already yelling about wrongful prosecution. He looked smaller than Ryan had imagined. Just an old man who'd spent his life building walls around his crimes, and now those walls were crumbling. Victoria testified against him. The media made her out to be either a hero or a traitor, depending on which channel you watched. Ryan thought she was just someone trying to do the right thing, even when it cost everything. They didn't see each other much during those months. Too complicated, their lawyers said. Too much scrutiny. But they talked on the phone every few days. Small conversations about nothing important. How Emma was doing in school, what Victoria was reading, whether it was ever going to stop feeling like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I miss the cabin," Victoria said during one call. "Yeah?" "It was simpler there, just us and the storm and a decision to make." "We could go back sometime." "After this is all over?" "After," Ryan agreed. The trial lasted 3 months. Ryan didn't attend most of it. He couldn't afford to take that much time off work, and Emma needed him, but he followed the coverage, watched as prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the evidence, saw his father's name mentioned repeatedly as the journalist who'd first tried to expose the fraud. James Hayes hadn't died for nothing after all. The jury convicted Richard Hale on 17 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 25 years. He'd be 90 before he got out, if he lived that long. Victoria sat in the courtroom for the verdict. Ryan watched it on a live stream from his phone during his lunch break at a construction site. When the foreman said guilty, he saw Victoria's shoulders shake once. Then she stood up, walked out with perfect posture, and disappeared from the camera's view. He called her that night. "You okay?" he asked. "He's my father." "So no, not really, but I'm relieved." "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you honest. I keep thinking about him in prison, wondering if he's scared, if he understands why this happened. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I just need to let it go." "You will. Eventually." "Will you? Let it go?" Ryan thought about his father. About 2 years of anger and grief and questions. About Emma asking why Grandpa wasn't coming back. "I think so," he said. "Or at least I'll try." 3 weeks after the trial ended, Victoria called with a different kind of news. "I bought a building," she said. "What kind of building?" "Warehouse space downtown. I'm converting it into a community center. Job training programs, after-school care, resources for single parents. All the things people like me never thought about because we were too busy making money." "That sounds perfect." "It sounds terrifying. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither did you when you became CEO. You figured it out." "That's different. This actually matters." Ryan smiled. "When does it open?" 6 months if everything goes right. A year if it doesn't. I'll need help, people who actually understand what communities need. Would you consider being on the advisory board?" "Me? You're a single parent who's been through hell and came out the other side." "That's exactly the perspective I need." "Victoria, I barely finished high school. I'm not board material." "You're exactly board material. Think about it." "Okay, I'll think about it." But he already knew his answer. 4 months later, Ryan stood in the converted warehouse watching Emma run through the new playground Victoria had built inside. Other kids were there too, some from the neighborhood, some whose parents were taking classes in the job training center upstairs. The space was bright and open and full of life. Victoria came up beside him. "What do you think?" "I think my daughter's going to want to live here." "That's the idea." She watched Emma climb the jungle gym fearlessly. "She's gotten bigger." "Kids do that." "I wouldn't know. I'm still figuring out how to talk to them without feeling like an alien." "You're doing fine. Better than fine." Victoria smiled. It reached her eyes now, which hadn't been true 6 months ago. She looked lighter, freer, like she'd finally stepped out from under the weight of her father's legacy. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you say yes to the advisory board? You could have walked away after the trial, gone back to your life, but you're here." Ryan thought about the cabin, about the decision they'd made together, about surviving the storm and everything that came after. "Because you asked," he said, "and because I think what you're building here actually matters, and because maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Maybe I want to build something too. Together? If you'll have me." Victoria took his hand, not as a CEO and a driver, not as two people brought together by circumstance, just as two people who'd been lost in different ways and found something worth holding on to. "Yeah," she said, "I'll have you." Emma ran up, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, did you see how high I climbed?" "I saw. You were very brave." Victoria says brave people do hard things, even when they're scared. Is that true? Ryan looked at Victoria, then back at his daughter. "Yeah, baby, that's true." "Then I'm brave. And so are you." Emma grabbed both their hands. "Come on, you have to see the art room. They have 1,000,000 colors." She dragged them toward the back of the building, chattering about paint and paper and all the things she was going to create. Ryan and Victoria followed, their hands still connected, and for the first time in 2 years, Ryan felt something that might have been hope. The truth hadn't brought his father back. Justice hadn't erased the grief. But they'd survived. They'd stood up against something bigger and stronger and won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but they'd won. And now, walking through this bright space full of second chances and new beginnings, Ryan understood what his father had been fighting for all those years. Not just to expose the truth, but to build a world where the truth mattered, where people like Victoria could choose integrity over empire, where people like Ryan could raise their daughters without fear. Where the storms came and went, but what you built in between was yours to keep. Emma was showing them paintings now, wild splashes of color that she insisted were dragons. Victoria knelt down to her level, asking serious questions about dragon anatomy. Emma explained with the absolute confidence of a 6-year-old that dragons had 3 hearts, because one wasn't enough for all that fire. "That makes sense," Victoria said solemnly. "You get it," Emma said, pleased. She looked at Ryan. "I like her, Daddy." "Me too, baby." Emma ran off to show another kid her dragon. Victoria stood up, brushing paint off her jeans. 3 hearts, she said. "Smart kid." "The smartest." They stood together watching Emma play, and Ryan felt the last piece of anger finally let go. His father was gone. That would always hurt, but James Hayes had raised a son who knew how to fight for what mattered, and that son had found someone else who knew the same thing. Not a perfect ending. Real life didn't do those, but a good one, an honest one they'd built together, storm by storm, choice by choice, until they'd created something that looked a lot like hope. Outside, the city moved on. Cases were closed. Headlines faded. Richard Hale began serving his sentence in a federal prison where nobody cared that he'd once run an empire. Hale Industries restructured under new management, smaller and more honest than it had been in decades. And in a converted warehouse downtown, two people who'd been strangers 3 months ago built something better than either of them had imagined possible. Not revenge, not victory, just a chance to start over, and the courage to take it. That was enough.